My normal political philosophy analysis is going to get a little personal on this version of the podcast, and it's because of recent events in the Democratic Party. I'm not a Democrat, but it's been rather interesting to see what's happened. And I'll start by talking about tater tots. If you don't know about tater tots yet, you will. They are one of the greatest inventions in the universe. They're also a food staple where I'm from, Minnesota, especially in the form of tater tot hot dish. It's not a casserole, it is a hot dish. I'm a fourth generation Minnesotan. I was born in a small farming town in southwestern Minnesota. It was then, and still is, within the congressional district that elected Tim Walz 6 times. I grew up a 45-minute drive from where Walz taught at Mankato West High School. Yes, Walz was born in Nebraska, but he moved to Minnesota in 1996, Minnesota being the home state of his spouse, and he is a quintessential Minnesotan. Nice, but not putting up with anyone's bullshit. Caring about one's neighbors, but minding his own damn business. We do not get involved in other people's personal business. It's that combination of being nice, but not a doormat, that describes being Minnesotan, including Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. It also describes many Americans, regardless of what state they live in, or at least is the type of decent, wholesome person with whom most people can relate. I share these things with you to introduce the concept of 60-20-20 America. I'm a professor of social philosophy with a lifelong interest in politics. I try to understand and explain why people think and act the way they do. That's why I write books about political action, including hostile political actions. The Harris-Walz ticket interests me, not only because I feel a strong affinity with Tim Walz. The ticket interests and honestly excites me because it is directed at the 60 segment of America, and that is a rarity in recent American politics. For far too long, the parties in America's political duopoly have focused on reaching their own bases, attacking the other party's base, and trying to cajole a few percentage points of the so-called independents. It is no wonder that voter turnout has been in a long-term downward trend. We can't blame anyone who says that they don't feel either party speaks to them, these being people who work for a living. It is often said that America is a politically divided country. This is true, but not in the ways that the talking heads claim. Usually in terms of Democrats versus Republicans is what the corporate media shows us and tells us all the time. But those aren't the dividing lines in America. They are not at the roots of the divisions in American society. There are a number of fault lines in American society. Loosely speaking, one of them is the one I am presenting here, the 60-20-20 spheres from the perspective of the Democratic Party. The numbers signify approximate percentages of the population who have general attitudes toward political matters. As a scholar, I'm focusing on the Democratic perspective because the Harris-Walz ticket is a significant departure in strategy within U.S. politics. That departure is interesting not just from a scholarly standpoint, but also for its effects on the country. We may be seeing a sea change in the political landscape, and quite frankly, I hope so. For the 60-20-20, 60%, 20%, 20%, what does that mean? The first 20. These people are Americans, this 20% of the population, but they don't care much about what's going on. They will be affected by politics, but they aren't interested in participating in politics, even in voting. These people matter, but they aren't part of the calculation of political parties. They can't be reached by political campaigning and marketing. They're not going to vote, they don't want to, they don't care, they have priced themselves out of the picture. The second 20, these people are also Americans, but they are the hard right wing. I single them out only because in the context of elections, this 20% of the population would never, ever even consider voting for anyone they believe isn't sufficiently right-wing. That's their right, no pun intended. These people matter, but they can't be reached by any appeals from anyone but a hard right Republican or the Libertarians, who are even more right-wing than the Republicans. That the Democratic Party has all too often tried to appeal to this segment, try to peel off a percentage or two from this second 20%, has been very silly, and it's never worked. And they keep trying it. Except maybe not now. Which leads us to the 60% of Americans. The majority of Americans are in this segment. Some of these people may not have much involvement in political matters, but they can be motivated to become active in politics, or at least vote. Most of the Americans in this 60 segment pay attention to what's going on, and they do vote. The typical Democratic strategy of recent decades has been to use fear of the second 20, the right wing, to scare some independents to join the Democratic base in voting against the right wing. I want to emphasize that against. For decades, other than 2008 with Obama, the Democratic Party has been focusing on appealing more to fear than to hope. That persuades some people, but most people correctly see that strategy as little more than a mirror image of the Republican strategy of fear and division. There are political zealots on both sides who are motivated by anger at the opposition, but most people just want to get shit done. They want a government that works and politicians connected to the real world and real people. Enter Tim Walz. Agree or disagree with his policies, you can't deny his authentic connections with real life. One pundit described Walz as a normie Uncle Dad character. That sounds like many Minnesotans I grew up with. The point is that Walz is someone with whom you can picture yourself sharing a bowl of tater tots. He's someone with whom you can picture chatting about your kids or the game this weekend or the weather or whatever. Many pundits are remarking, almost shocked, that Walz is not a lawyer. It is a historical oddity that a presidential ticket has someone who isn't a lawyer. And yes, I know Harris is a lawyer, but they're not both lawyers. What's an even greater oddity is that we don't have a rich person on a presidential ticket. And it's a bit odd that the pundits aren't remarking on that. Walz is a teacher. When was the last time, if ever, a teacher was on a presidential ticket? It's always rich lawyers or rich businessmen or just rich somebody. Those people are also Americans, but they don't share tater tots with us normies. And here's the far more important thing, at least in my mind. Walz is one of the 60% in ways that transcend profession or income class. Walz will speak to the majority of Americans by walking the talk, showing what is possible. Is he a politician? Well, he's been a 6-term House of Representatives person, and he's been a governor, so he's kind of a politician, but he's kind of not a politician. And he's normal, in the good sense of normal. He's one of the 60%. And this could change things. It could change things in American politics rather dramatically. Because here's just a short list of what Walz has always lived by. And I know him because He is my governor. I'm registered to vote in the state of Minnesota. I vote for Tim Walz. Twice I voted for him. But here's a short list of what Walz has always lived by and will show America as a VP candidate. 1. You can be white and stand against the bullshit of white nationalism. 2. You can be a man and stand with women defending their bodily autonomy and life autonomy. 3. You can have your faith and still respect others' faith. Walz is the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, which is a pretty liberal organization. 4. You can own a gun and hunt with it and understand the needs for sensible gun legislation and responsible gun ownership. 5. You can be pro-worker and not cave into corporate capitalism. 6. You can be heterosexual and stand for LGBT rights. Finally, you can be against extremism on all sides without becoming an extremist, and so on. Joy is a word that Walz frequently uses. He's not using it as a gimmick. It's his philosophy of life. It is, I'm convinced, the big reason Harris thinks Walz has the right vibe with her and what she wants to do as president. Get shit done with joy and care for people. Walz also uses the word weird to describe Trump and Vance, and in the history of political rhetoric, wow, is that accurate. It's a very accurate description of Trump and Vance and the whole MAGA mob. But we can, as Walz does, acknowledge the whole MAGA movement as weird without hatred. I wrote this in my book, Why Trump, that we can consider the people who are against us to be adversaries without denigrating them as enemies. Walz can do that. Harris can do that. Earlier Democrats couldn't do that. Republicans, of course, they can't do that. In a political culture dominated by competing narratives of hate and fear, a big dose of joy will be a message most welcomed by most of the 60% of Americans. Most people want a better life for everyone more than they want to destroy a perceived enemy. We may finally see a presidential campaign that understands that. Maybe. But hey, have some tater tots. And it's fine by me if you eat them with ketchup or mayo or barbecue sauce or a combination of anything. Because that's